Social media platforms in recent days have been flooded with AI-generated images imitating the unique style of Studio Ghibli, which in turn has reignited debate about the risks and rewards of artificial intelligence in society. So what do our foreign journalists think? We tell you in a bit. Hello and welcome. It's Tuesday, April 22nd here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. On Press Perspective today, we touch upon our new normal in the presence of artificial intelligence. For more on this, I have Thomas Maresca with American news agency UPI here in the studio. Thomas, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Thanks. Great to be here.
I also have Steven Borowiec with Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia here in the studio. Steven, welcome back.
Nice to see you.
Right, Thomas, we will start with you. So straight away, let's begin with this new ChatGPT feature that has been garnering quite a bit of global attention for viral images in the style of Studio Ghibli. So what's this feature and why is it fueling tensions between artistic integrity and technological advancements?
Right, so this feature, this just was really a month ago. It came along with OpenAI releasing one of its latest models, GPT-4o. And it kind of took off after just online on social media. I think it was really just one software engineer on X, formerly Twitter, posted an image of himself, like a vacation snapshot, done in the style of this Studio Ghibli, which is, a famous Japanese animation studio, Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, and it has a very distinctive style. And that just spawned this almost overnight social media craze where everything and anything was being rendered in this Studio Ghibli style. So things that are famous memes, I think on the screen now you see one, the guy explaining to his girlfriend. There's one, the sort of distracted boyfriend turning around, or the little girl smiling when the house is on fire. So kind of everything that it was almost like the internet feeding on itself. But then people also were doing sort of some darker things with it. There was famous images. There was some stuff from like the JFK assassination, and even the White House did a very bad taste, Studio Ghibli version of a photo of a, someone being deported or detained by, ICE, and so that caused some controversy. And I think to speak to what it has touched off, on the one hand, there has been this, appreciation of how cool and amazing this technology is, and it's funny and entertaining to see some of this stuff. But, it's raised many of the issues that have already been surrounding AI, and especially in this kind of generative AI space, which is, starting with the idea of where is AI getting this training on these various models? Are there copyright infringements? The Ghibli one is a little bit more fuzzy because it's not really one specific piece, but things like even currently now, the New York Times and a bunch of media outlets are suing OpenAI over use of their content, without compensation for the training of all these models. And there's a number of lawsuits around that. And Meta is basically caught downloading tons of pirated novels to use on training its Meta AI. So there's that aspect of it is in the spotlight, as well as more of the kind of almost like existential questions about what AI does, AI versus human creativity and how it can be used. I think positively can be used as an augmentation type of thing, but on the other hand, is it replacing artisans, artists? And there's specifically the Studio Ghibli is almost the perfect test case in a way, because it's the most human and the most handmade of many of these animation studios. Famously, it takes years to produce one of their films, and every cell is basically hand drawn. So it's almost the farthest reaches of these extremes. And old comments from Hayao Miyazaki, who's the founder of Studio Ghibli and one of the top animators, came out after this emerged, and he was basically very down on the prospect. This is from years ago, but was very down on the prospect of AI and animation, and called it an insult to life itself. So there's that spirit of it. So it touches on these various elements that are all surrounding AI in the world.
Have you tried it though, Thomas?
I did, but actually only because I knew we would be talking about it. So I figured I wasn't quick on the draw with it. And Yeah, it's the same thing. It's cool. I was putting in pictures of my dog, and the output is, it's amazing that it can do this thing so quickly, and it is sort of charming, the image, but at the same time, there's an uneasiness that I feel around it, and, around a lot of generative AI, where there's something uncanny about it, inhuman, and something that, I find it hard to separate some of the other ethical issues, especially around, creativity and,
Right.
fair pay and fair. Yeah.
It's a difficult issue.
Sure.
It's a difficult issue. Steven, staying with OpenAI, as Thomas mentioned, it recently released a new version of its language model. Tell us a bit more.
The takeaway that I took from this is it builds on the uncanny aspect that Thomas was just alluding to there, where like you're dealing with a software platform that is really skilled at mimicking human creativity. And in this case, the objective of this model, which is called the O3 model, is something called simulated reasoning. And so this represents a step from previous AI models where, as this AI model is functioning, it can kind of pause in the process and it can attempt to learn from the output that it has already put out there. And it can kind of attempt to kind of learn as it goes in a very kind of quick basis. And in doing so, come as close as this kind of technology has ever come to being able to mimic or represent human reasoning. So the significance of this, I think, is it's going straight at the objective of, the criticism of AI is that it cannot do things like perform really creative tasks or perform the active human reasoning by being able to tap into previous experience or emotion or, human senses. All it can really do is scrape what's available and then reconstitute that in albeit a very convincing way. And so what this does is it uses what's called chain of thought prompting, which allows it to mimic and kind of present itself as coming up with things as it goes, and it creates a sense of spontaneity and creativity and all the rest. So for the boosters of this, for the believers in this kind of technology, this is a very promising step if it really works out, because it makes AI, generative AI, that much more effective. But for people who are, as I think we all are, at least to some extent, kind of ambivalent or a little bit nervous about this, it's going to escalate that sense of when you're interacting with an AI platform of having to remind yourself that this isn't actually a person, and that might leave you feeling kind of uneasy. I guess the optimistic take is that this will allow benevolent applications of this. This will perhaps allow people to learn. You can plug your own questions into this, and you can come away with a more nuanced or a more intuitive understanding of something. But at the same time, a theme I think we'll keep coming back to in this conversation is that the baseline reality that this is a machine and not a person is something that we're not totally comfortable with. And I don't know if it's necessarily a step forward to become totally comfortable with it. Maybe we should insist on real human interaction as AI not being a full substitute for a real human.
Right, and before we delve further into that, Thomas, Stanford, it released its AI index for this year. For those not aware of this particular index, do tell us a bit about what it is and what are some of its findings for this particular year?
Right, this is a report issued by, it's the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI, and this is the 8th edition, and it's just a big big report tracking data across all, many aspects of AI, from technical performance to economic impact, policy, what's going on that front, how it's being used in education, questions around responsible AI use. And so, a number of findings. I think many would not be surprising, just in terms of performance has gone up dramatically in a number of benchmarks that are testing performance and problem solving and various things, variety of different ones, jumping up 66% in some cases over the year before. Investment has been quite high. US is leading in private investment, was $109 billion in 2024. China It's well behind with 9.3 billion. UK is below that with like around 4.5. We're seeing a lot of business adoption. I think something like 78% of businesses in the US, I believe, are using AI to some extent, up from 55% the year before. I think some of the things that really grabbed people's attention were questions around global competition, and they found that the US is ahead in terms of creating the most so-called notable AI models with 40, and China made 15, but they found that China's performance was almost reached near parity with the US. And so that is already sort of fueling further this US-China kind of competition around AI. And China's leading in some areas like in AI publications and patents. And so doing so also with kind of a limitation because there has already been US export controls of some of these high-end graphics processing chips. So, if you're the US, this is another source of concern that China's doing with less investment, less tech, power behind it. It talks a bit about where AI really seems to be succeeding or doing the most beneficial sort of development, and that's been in science, really. We've seen AI having impact. There was 2 Nobel Prizes this year in physics and in chemistry that came out of AI-based projects. And then it also measures a sense of optimism among the public about, and this is also interesting where you see a large gap between sort of the West and, say, Asia in general, where optimism of the sense that AI will on the whole be more beneficial rather than have a negative impact. And in the US, it's 39%, low optimism. Canada is like 40, something Netherlands 36. But in China, it's 83%. South Korea, it's also quite high, close to around 70%. And something South Korea, there was something 73% said they were excited about the future, and 40% were concerned or reserved. So we're seeing a split in that area, and that may help determine how this plays out country by country. And the other one of the big topics they talked about too is how regulation is coming forward. And there's been an increase in sort of government-led or multinational-led frameworks about just responsible AI, ethical use of AI, things about misinformation and just transparency, trustworthiness. And so there's been a big jump in those, but there hasn't really been an implementation yet of many of these things. So they're all in this kind of framework stage, but at the same time, AI is progressing. It's just such an extraordinarily rapid pace. So to speak a little bit as well to what Steven was saying before too, there's this sense of could be getting ahead of what we're prepared to do in a regulatory framework. And one other thing that to mention what Steven brought up about, they were saying a weakness still remains with that reasoning capacity, that AI is okay at doing mimicking, but not really thinking or problem solving in a way that we would regard as thinking. So that still remains a real kind of weak area in AI that is being addressed, or that's the hope for the industry in the future.
Right.
Maybe I could just jump in. Is there any explanation for the disparity in optimism? Like, why is it that Westerners are a lot less optimistic than people in Asia?
I don't think in detail, unless it goes farther and farther. I was more judging by the tables and the graphs. But I think, if I were to speculate, I think there's just been more coverage of it in perhaps both, scenarios, and certainly the negative scenarios of AI, I think has been a kind of a cultural theme in the US or in the West for quite a long time. And I can't really speak to how much that's penetrated with China. And I think, maybe specifically on the China front too, there's so much regard for AI as this positive national sort of growth step forward and a competition with the US that there may be an inclination to see it positively. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
Because my own speculation was, I thought maybe there are more people in Asia who have felt as though technology has transformed their life in a positive way than there are in the West.
Possibly.
There are more people who have gone from, in recent decades, in recent memory, gone from perhaps an agrarian lifestyle to a mechanized lifestyle, and have had things like electrification and the onset of internet technology. And maybe there's just more technological optimism in this part of the world.
Right, for sure. That's a possibility, something,
yeah.
a story that perhaps you guys will cover later on.
Yes.
Right? But for now, though, according to the Stanford AI Index, we can see that the West, the public in the West is a bit more reserved with regard to advances in AI than the public here in the East. And speaking of the public here in the East, here in the country specifically, Steven, AI also appears to have a say in South Korea's early presidential election. A number of presidential contenders have shared their pledges with regard to AI. We don't have to go into the details of who they are, but what have you been hearing?
I would just start by saying that in South Korean politics, like on both sides of the aisle, there is a strong consensus that the government ought to play an active role in supporting big and important and emerging industries. So both parties, as they trot out their pledges and as they make things more firm, you can expect that they will say things like, we will lead, we will support the AI industry, and like we will be behind a bold and an ambitious vision for South Korea to rise to become a dominant AI country in the world. They will differ somewhat in their messaging. They will differ somewhat in how they, perhaps how they project allocating the resources. Maybe this will go mostly to private companies who have already demonstrated an aptitude in this area, or maybe this will go to a more national option. I don't think that any of the leading candidates have a particular background in AI, but I do think that something that it makes sense for all of these contenders to say is that they will lead the development of a uniquely Korean version of something like ChatGPT. And I believe some candidates have already said something to this effect. I mean, South Korea is kind of unique in that it tends to have a lot of homegrown technological things. Google is still not the main search engine here, for one example, and WhatsApp is not the main messaging app here. And there's a lot of examples like that. So I do think that, like, kind of in line with this precedent, in line with this past practice, South Korea will be, the next administration will be looking to channel resources towards the development of something like that.
Right. In the meantime, though, Thomas, in the academic arena, quite a number of elementary schools here in South Korea are embracing AI textbooks, while I understand schools elsewhere, like in the US, their debate still remains with regard to the presence of AI, or potential presence of AI in the classroom. Tell us a bit more about this discrepancy.
Right, so here in South Korea, the last I saw as of March, something like 30% of elementary schools are using digital textbooks that are powered by AI. And this was part of a plan it was a big push by the Yoon administration to push this forward. And it hasn't been without controversy and sort of setbacks here, but right, so far, elementary schools, it's sort of a rollout, a staggered rollout, and so it's 3rd and 4th grade in elementary school, first year of middle school and first year of high school are getting some of these digital textbooks in a few subjects only: English, math, and something called informatics, which is like IT and computer education. And so this is the first phase, and it's intended to be rolled out to all grades by 2028, and in pretty much all subjects except some things like art, music, phys ed. But it has been met with, I think it's still early to see how it's turning out, I would say, but it has been met with resistance. I mean, certainly from the Korean Teachers Union. In December, they had a survey that said, more than 98% felt that they didn't have adequate training to start implementing these in the classroom. And concerns that you hear about from teachers and from some parents are things like worrying about just more over-reliance on devices for their kids, a sense of this decline in literacy, which also seems to be offshoot of just phone use and social media use. Whereas the advocates are arguing that this will give more personalized learning experience, may help to bridge the gap between sort of haves and have-nots, those who get extra tutoring outside of class. And you can see in some cases where certain subjects it seems well suited. For example, English, they say we'll give personalized feedback on your English. And I already see kind of language learning programs using AI just even out in the marketplace. So it remains a debate, but it certainly seems to be moving forward here. In the U.S., there's less of a coordinated national strategy, but really state by state are coming up with their own frameworks and outlines for how to use AI. And it's definitely appearing in classrooms in different formats. I mean, many teachers are saying they're using it to some extent. I mean, I think it was something I saw 25% by one RAND study. And you know, there are already products like Google Classroom and things that are off the shelf use. And so but it has created, the debate revolves around some of the same issues for sure. And you know, from just anecdotally or things I'm seeing kind of in the culture, there's just also this question that is coming out that speaks to some of this idea of what is human versus what is machine, where it's something about even the process of learning. I've seen this with a lot from sort of higher levels, high school and universities, talking about how much students are already using AI to write their papers or to solve math problems. And it's, you know, there's just a whole, you know, it's a whole battle now to just find, you know, to identify what's been done with AI. And then, but, you know, on a bigger question is, you know, learning, a lot of educators will say, is not about just getting the right answer or getting the result. It's literally the process of how do you work on something so much that you can come to an understanding or come to your own opinion about it, or be able to express it. And that's the process of something like writing an essay that certainly looks like it could be in danger of being kind of diminished in terms of if you use generative AI. I mean, even math problems is similar to that. And that sort of also speaks to the question earlier about something like art. You know, it's not about perfection as much as it is about the human drive and the human ability to, you know, stick with something and overcome obstacles or, you know, personal barriers to create something. And I think that's a question that is being also just thrown in this mix of, you know, how AI is affecting us. And certainly it applies a lot to the you know, educational arena.
Right, and beyond the academic arena, Steven, AI applications intended for companionship, they're also fueling quite a bit of debate. This is something you mentioned earlier. What is this the future of companionship, do you think, or is this a cause for concern?
As with so many questions on this topic, it's probably a little bit of both. Reading up on this topic, you come across testimonials from people who will describe their AI partners as ideal. They'll say, you know, there was one quote that I came across of a woman who was describing her AI partner, and she said how she didn't have to deal with her partner's family or kids or any of this other stuff. And I mean, you can say on the one hand that you don't have to deal with all that. The flip side of that is you don't get to deal with that. You don't get to meet your partner's friends because they don't have any. You don't have to deal with your partner's personal history because it doesn't have one. So I'm skeptical that AI can or should fulfill our deepest emotional needs as humans, just because for a lot of reasons. But the one that I would just wish to highlight now is AI, unless they eventually program it in this way, is not meant to challenge us in the way that a healthy romantic partner would. I mean, one of the kind of undersold benefits of being in a long-term relationship with somebody is that they can, in addition to loving you and supporting you and flattering you, they can also push you to better yourself by, you know, calling out the less beneficial parts of your own habits or your own personality in a way that an AI model won't. I mean, middle-aged men and older men who are married tend to live longer, and one reason for that is they have somebody in their life who can notice changes in their health, and they can say, hey, there's this, you know, your body is doing this, you better go get that checked out. And so I wonder if, I don't think that AI will be able to fulfill that kind of role. This is all just like a very kind of long way of saying that I am skeptical of AI's ability to provide real human companionship, not even touching on the fact that the AI lacks a physical component.
Right, and I hope my middle-aged husband is listening to you talk right now.
Okay, well, I'm saying this as a middle-aged husband myself, so
right.
I didn't want to overtly say that this is based on personal experience, but that's probably coming across.
Right. One final question, a quick one, Thomas. So amid the alarm, the applause with regard to AI, there is growing awareness about the need to engage with AI in a safe and productive manner. What are some of the common strategies as shared by pundits?
Well, I mean, it applies to maybe internet or online usage in general, but to a more acute way. It's, being just cautious about you sharing personal data with ChatGPT. I mean, being aware of what, where these chatbots are coming from, not really relying on AI for accuracy, especially in critical things. I read something anecdotally in an article where some doctors, AI is good at identifying medical conditions, but some doctors actually were making worse diagnoses because they were relying on it more so. So, don't give over all of your thought processes to AI. Just questions about trying to cross-check, trying to bring as much transparency to what you're using, being aware of bias in AI. It's supposed to be this neutral system, but it absorbs any human bias that exists in its training data. AI has been shown to absorb. So, questions about that. And then I think just in general, this idea that we need bigger frameworks. You can't ask an individual to sort of police everything that's out there, but these sort of government level or intergovernmental level frameworks, as well as company-wide, are something that need to be implemented as well.
All right, more guardrails then a bit. All right, Thomas, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you.
And Stephen, thank you very much for your insights.
Always a pleasure.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. We'll return same time tomorrow with a collection of a number of social headlines. Do join us then. Thank you for now.